Today we will discuss Piaget's theory of cognitive development. We'll take a closer look at what cognitive development is, explore each of his stages, and discuss the limitations of his theory.
First, let's define cognition and cognitive development. Cognition involves thinking and memory processes. Cognitive development is long-term changes in cognition. Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist. Piaget spent his time observing children and how they learn. He conducted the majority of his work during the mid-20th century. Piaget's research was focused on how children's development progresses as they get older. His two major ideas covered organizational structure of the mind and the stages of childhood development.
Piaget's theory of cognitive development has 4 stages. These stages can also be seen as sequences of thinking patterns. Piaget's theory has 4 key components that we should discuss before we get into what each of the stages are. Firstly, all of the stages happen in the same order. Secondly, none of the stages are ever skipped. According to Piaget, throughout development, every child goes through every single one of his stages. Thirdly, each stage is a transformation of the one before it. There's a significant, noticeable change between each stage. Fourthly, each earlier stage is integrated into the later ones, hence the staircase model.
Piaget describes 2 basic tendencies that every person's brain will have. The first is organization. Kids must learn to organize both their new and old thoughts, ideas, and experiences. They are consistently in the process of changing, adapting, and rearranging what they learn and observe into categories that make sense. People create schemas, which are mental maps that help them to understand and relate old and new concepts. This is an example of a schema that a child may have about sports cars. Over the time, they will learn and observe new things about the category of sports cars and fit them into this category.
The second of the 2 tendencies is adaptation. Kids must learn how to adjust to new environments and experiences in order to learn and grow. They must learn to process new information in order to understand new concepts. Sometimes this involves changing or adapting old information. Piaget proposes that this involves 2 functions known as accommodation and assimilation. First, we'll talk about accommodation. When a person encounters new information, they may draw on old and reinterpret old information in order to make it fit the new situation. They must form new schemas or mental maps to accommodate the new information. For example, if a child used to think of a cat and a dog as the same thing because they are both furry with 4 legs, they may begin to notice differences and change the idea. They will then correctly reinterpret their old idea of cat and make new categories for cats and dogs.
Interprets new situations in order to fit old information. They must fit this new information into pre-existing categories in their brain. For example, a child may have an idea of what a common animal is, something that is furry and walks on 4 legs. If they see a cat for the first time, they will correctly fit this into the category animal.
The sensory motor stage occurs from the time a child is born to around the age of 2. Infants think by means of their senses and motor actions. They touch, manipulate, look, listen to, and even bite objects. Going through these actions allow them to learn about the world and their surroundings as they begin their early cognitive development. During the sensory motor stage, children begin to imitate people. Younger infants intentionally repeat actions that provide pleasure, such as sucking a thumb. As they get older, they repeat actions that affect their environment, such as reaching for toys. Object permanence is a belief that objects exist whether or not they are actually present. This is a great achievement during the sensory motor development stage, as it marks a transformation from how older infants think compared to younger infants. A child is unable to talk during the majority of this stage, but Piaget proved that infants can still represent objects without having to use words.
Some examples of the sensory motor stage are as follows. In the top left, you see a child imitating his father. Imitation is a common thing in this stage, as that is how children learn a lot of things. In the top right, the little girl is playing peekaboo. At this stage, children develop object permanence, which is realizing that an object still exists even when they can't see it. Peekaboo is a great example of this, and that is why children are so intrigued with it. In the bottom right, there is a person setting steps towards a goal. In this stage, it is common for children to start setting goals and working towards that goal, whether they be big or small. For example, getting a sticker for good behavior is a goal for a child and in turn could make the child behave better.
According to Piaget, the pre-operational stage is a stage that every child goes through from the ages of 2 to 7. In this stage, children begin to develop a sense of imaginative thinking. The main way this will be seen is in dramatic play. Dramatic play is when children play make-believe. An example of this is when students play house or school. This is a natural part of growing up. A lot of times, teachers even give students a time and a play space in order to have dramatic play. At this point in a child's life, they are beginning to think in both imaginative and realistic ways. This is an early example of metacognition. Metacognition is the awareness and understanding of one's thoughts.
Some examples of the pre-operational stage are as follows. In the top right, you see a child being extremely egocentric and only concerned with herself. This is very common in the pre-operational stage, and children often have trouble sharing toys or worrying about others. In the bottom right, there are the two boys speaking through the cans. In the pre-operational stage, kids start speaking and using language in general. Finally, in the top left, there are kids playing house. Playing make-believe happens a lot in this stage, and it is known as dramatic play.
Concrete operational is the third stage in Piaget's cognitive development theory. This occurs between the ages of 7 and 11. In this stage, children's thinking improves drastically from the previous stages. It is still very basic, but they are able to solve problems more systematically. This allows the students to succeed further in academic skills, especially understanding math and science experiments. On page 45 of the text, it states, Piaget called this period the concrete operational stage because children mentally operate on concrete objects and events. Two differences between the concrete operational stage and the second stage of the pre-operational is reversibility and the ability to decenter. Reversibility is the ability to think about the steps of the process in any order. The other difference is the ability to decenter. This allows students to focus on different aspects of a problem.
The child in the picture thinks that the taller cup has more water in it just because it's taller. On the bottom, there's a picture of a spelling test. This spelling test represents reversibility. For example, a teacher tells students to think of a word, write it out, and then tell their friends. Students who have not developed reversibility will not be able to do these steps in any order but the one given to them. Students who have developed reversibility could do these steps in any order.
In Piaget's last stage, formal operational, the child's thinking goes beyond tangible objects to hypothetical and abstract ones. At this stage, teachers begin to ask hypothetical questions, and to answer these questions, students begin to use hypothetical reasoning. This means that students have to look at ideas from several different angles, and that all must be done in their minds. The hypothetical reasoning is used mainly for scientific problems. Students who excel at hypothetical reasoning become more independent than other students who are still in the concrete operational stage. However, the formal operational stage is not sufficient for all-around school success. Formal thinking works best for mathematics and science classes.
On the left, there is a girl thinking abstractly and out of the box. On the right, there is an example of a hypothetical reasoning in the scientific process. Hypothetical thinking in this stage is thinking beyond the facts you are given and then asking, what if?
Piaget's theory of cognitive development has several limitations, however. Children don't always think in stages. Making generalizations about all children and their ways of thinking throughout development inevitably exclude children whose development occurs differently. Piaget's theory also underestimates children's cognitive abilities. For example, a child could develop faster than Piaget's age groups or go through several stages at once. Piaget's theories also overlook cultural factors. A child's development is very dependent on their environment, and this is something that Piaget's theory does not address.
Piaget observed cognition and cognitive development through observing children and the way their brains process thinking. He organizes this into 4 different stages: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. Each child needs to go through each stage to move on into the next one. Piaget's theory of cognitive development paved the way to several other theories of development. These theories have helped teachers to better understand the way children's development affects their thinking and better cater to their needs.